Welcome to the Sincerely God podcast. I'm Sarah, and I believe that God is speaking to all of us all the time and in many different ways. The primary way that I listen is through two-way journaling. And on this podcast, I share excerpts from my journaling time with God, which are really inspirational messages spoken from the perspective of God to you. I'll talk more about what two-way journaling is and explore other methods which may be helpful for you to listen to God in your own unique way. I'm just an ordinary person who gets to hear from an extraordinary God, and I believe you can too. Thanks for joining. Hi everyone. Well, welcome to the episode today. I'm so excited. I have my good friend Anna joining, and we're actually going to do basically a part 2 to the two-way journaling. If you remember back all the way, I think it was episode 7, I did kind of an introduction to two-way journaling as a way to tune in to God speaking to you. That's one of my primary methods. A lot of what I share on this podcast are from those journaling times. Well, Anna actually does that two-way journaling as well. And so we want to just kind of share some of what we've learned and maybe some additional tips if this is something that you're trying. Maybe you've had some questions about it. So today, hopefully we can answer some of those questions. So Anna, do you want to just kind of introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Anna, and I have been married with my husband for 24 years, and we have 2 children, 16 and 18-year-old. And this two-way journaling thing is new for me, and all because of you. So I'm kind of excited to share a little bit about what that's looked like, and to have the master next to me so that we can discuss it as well.
It's going to be just like our everyday chit chat about all the cool God stuff.
And I appreciate that you are so good with me going, what does this mean? And what is this about? And what just happened there? And because it's all new to most of us. And to have somebody that you can kind of like get feedback from and check in with as you're kind of learning a new skill, really, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way, it's like almost learning a new language, right? It's the language of heaven. It's the language of God. And it's really been good to have you along to help me.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed it because it's like you're getting these incredible words from God, and it's so exciting. And then seeing the similarity in how he speaks, right? I talked about that in the first episode a little bit. The book that Mark Verkler wrote, he includes in it like samples of, people over the years, like samples from their two-way journaling. And I loved seeing the similarities, even though it's a little different for each person. So that's been super cool too, because it's almost like, hey, he uses that same example or that same analogy with me. And so it's been amazing. I have loved it so much.
Well, and I think what's interesting about that is sometimes I'll be like, well, that sounds a lot like what you just told Sarah. And I'll wonder myself if am I just copying what you already told me? Is this really from God, or is this just me kind of somehow inserting, my experiences into the situation? And more often than not, what's funny is he will literally know that's what I'm thinking, and he will address it. And he'll be like, no, this is for you.
Right.
That's for her, and this is for you. And yes, you guys are very, we're walking through a lot of the same journey right now. And so, there's some common themes and common things that he'll speak into for both of us. Mm-hmm. But he makes it pretty clear most of the time, like, no, that's for her. This is for you. And yes, it is me speaking.
Yes, I love that. I mean, it still happens, but I remember especially at the beginning when I was, it's, you almost don't believe it because it's too incredible. Yeah. And you're like, am I making this up? And so many times in my journaling, he'd be like, yes, this is me. Stop questioning. Yeah. And then even now I'll be kind of, let's say, having the journaling conversation, and then I'll still have this like other thought, and he'll directly address it and be like, and you're wondering about this, and I'll answer that as well. Like, yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And I thank you so much for introducing me to this. Been kind of stepping into this new journey. I'm a highly logical person, right? Like, we just took a test on kind of personalities and how we work, and turns out I scored 100% on logical. Okay, so apparently I don't work out of my emotional side. So this idea of kind of stepping into the mystery of God, right, and kind of allowing the Holy Spirit to or this idea of like God's going to speak to you, whatever way that looks like, right? Whether it's through visions, whether it's through dreams, or I mean, I would hear you talk about all these things and it sounds amazing, but I was honestly, if I didn't know you, I'm a highly skeptical person by nature, right? The logical side of me be like, okay. And so it's been a little bit of a journey to step into this world to now. I think a year ago, if I listened to myself now, I'd be like, who is that lady?
Yes.
I don't recognize her. But it truly is life-changing.
Yeah, I agree. And I can, mine's a little bit longer of a journey, but I often say, okay, old me, 10 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever, if they saw me now, like I would call me crazy and like all the things.
Oh yeah, totally.
So it gives me a whole new level of, I would say, grace for other people, that because I've experienced so much that is outside of my own logic, expectation, when I see someone else doing something, let's say in their spiritual journey that seems weird or I've never personally experienced it, I used to be very judgmental and dismissive, and now I'm like, shoot, I've done something just as weird as that. So, well, who am I to say that's not God, right?
Well, and I think it's really important. You've talked about this, and I think for certainly me and my family lately, we're all just kind of being flooded in a way all of a sudden with these new revelations and spiritual giftings that I know my husband has been pursuing for a long, long time. But now it's just this very fruitful season. And I think a lot of it really has to do with just now you kind of see what it looks like on a personal level, right? You've seen how that works. And there's somebody that, like you, that I think can speak into what does that sound like? What does that look like? Whether it's movement and just leaning into, I think perhaps things that we would have dismissed in the past, right? And I think that is such a key to this. I think about what you say, right? Like God speaks to us all the time. But if you're not quite aware, right, that radio dial just isn't tuned, random thoughts. I'm one of those people that have random thoughts all day long, right? I need to decompress. I'm an introvert by nature. I have a lot of thinking time. And most of the time, I'm sure it's me, but now I realize a lot of times it's actually God putting ideas in my head and saying, let's have a conversation about this. Let's kind of work through that thing that you're thinking about. Right. And so just whether it's through dreams and just thoughts or visual or pictures or words on a page, I think just being aware of all of these different ways that God can speak to us is so important.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we don't have the exact same story, but I grew up in the church. I've spent a lot of time being a Christian. And I say that, semi-sarcastically, but truly, like I had as much of a relationship with Jesus as I felt I could, but I didn't know. Like I didn't know that we could hear directly, like, for your specific situation. And I certainly had times where certain teaching in the Bible or, maybe a podcast I was listening, like God was certainly still getting through and speaking themes to me, but it kind of reminds me of, this is a silly example, but the movie Transformers where it's like there's Bumblebee and he can't actually speak. He has to like pull clips from all the different things. There's a limitation, right? It's like God can still get through, but when you have that direct language, and I'm also highly logical, I think we're very similar. Very similar. And that's probably why the two-way journaling, I think, clicked so well for you as well. Like I described that it's not for everyone. I'm definitely very logical. I'm a word person. And so it fits very well. But that's not everybody. So I do want to encourage you that if you've tried it and it just doesn't seem to fit, that's totally fine. God can speak to you in so many different ways. So keep searching for what is that unique way that is really, fits how he created you. But yeah, it is transformative, right? When you can have one-on-one conversations with God and you can ask them, I have this situation, which of course never existed in the Bible. Therefore I cannot get a direct, guidance. Sure, there's a lot that's principles and
or
things.
You're like, do I apply this thing or do I apply that thing, right? There's so many stories in the Bible and I feel like as we know, you can kind of pick and choose how to use the Bible, frankly, to
Right. Yeah.
match perhaps what it is that you wanted
Right.
to justify, right? And
Right.
so I think having him speak specifically into the situation has been just really life changing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to share just about kind of when you first, like, if we've got somebody that maybe hasn't tried
Yeah.
two-way journaling, but they want to try, is there anything that, because it is a little more fresh for you, that is just either suggestions or just sharing
Yeah.
kind of your experience?
Yeah, so let me kind of take it back and just share a little bit about how I got started. I think, I've heard you talk about it a lot. And I was always thinking, well, that's really cool, but I don't know if I can do that. Partly because I'm just not a diary person. I'm not a disciplined person. My streak on the Bible app is like 2 days. My streak in writing diaries is like maybe 3 or 4 tops, right? I have a lot of like 15 notebooks of diaries that are like, oh, here's my new, like, I'm going to do this. And it's 5 pages tops, right? So I just thought maybe I just don't have that discipline. Like I used to think like, oh, if you're one of those people that has a diary every day, this is great for you. I'm not that. But I was just kind of running into a time, honestly, where there's just so much going on. And God's speaking to me in other ways and showing me tidbits of here and there of all the things that he's doing, which is wonderful and beautiful. I was like, I need more. I'm one of those people that are like, just tell me what's going on, please. I need to know what's going on, or I need more instructions. And these are complicated, big stuff that frankly is happening. And so I was kind of needing clarity. And so I just thought, let me try this. I hear you talk about it. I'm a writer. I do like words. As you can see, I can talk a lot. So I thought, well, let me try that. Let me just try this. And so I just had a birthday a couple months ago, and I thought, oh, maybe this is my new thing for this coming year. And I'm one of those people that are like a theme for the year, or here's my goal. Here's what I want to do this coming year. And so I thought, well, let me try this. Let me see if this is the new thing that can kind of take me into another farther step with God. And so on my 51st birthday, I started my first journal entry. And what I did, because I know you freehand write your journal. I was not going to do that. So I have my iPad and my keyboard, and I just sat down one day. And I do think the step number one is really just making space and being quiet. And so I just happened to have a couple hours of free time, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna just sit here in my quiet time. There was nobody in the house. I opened up my journal. Or opened up my iPad, and literally it was just like blank screen, right? And I thought, what do I do? Where do I even start? And it literally just started with me typing like, okay, here I am, God.
I love it.
I'm gonna try this. I don't know how this is gonna work, but here I am. And then there was this like, okay, what do I do now? And it wasn't even a prayer. It was literally just like, and here's what I am thinking. And then I just stopped. And you just kind of hold that moment and you just kind of give it that quietness. And then something will pop into your mind. And so whatever that next thing is, I just started writing it down. And it was really weird. It just felt really weird, like I'm taking dictation in a way. And I just started typing in whatever came to mind. And there was a part of me that was thinking like, you're just thinking this.
Right.
How do you know that's from God? Like, this is just your thinking in some way. But I just went with it and I just typed it down. And that first day, there was a lot of this like cat face, I called it. It was like, what is that? I don't know what you're saying. Should I write it down? Should I not?
Right,
I don't know what this is. And so I just put a question mark around. I'll like type something down. If I wasn't sure that's what it was, I'll just put a question mark after that and put it in parentheses. That first day was tough. I will tell you, like I didn't get a lot. It was this really kind of straining kind of thing. And it felt like, am I making this up?
Right.
But I want to say a page or half a page. I can't remember, something like that. And then I put it away. I was like, oh, okay. And I went back and I reread it and I was like, oh, 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 that actually doesn't sound like me.
Right?
I don't talk like that. I
love it.
don't use these words. That kind of sounds a little more like Sarah's thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, huh. So I think the second part is also really helpful, which is then, you know, what I did was I immediately like copy and paste it and send it to you and be like, Sarah, is this what that sounds like? Is this what that is? And you were like, yes, it sounds like God's voice. And I think that was really helpful for me because I don't know. I can't judge it. I felt like it was, but it was really, really helpful to be able to send it to somebody like you and for you to speak into, go, yeah, that's pretty much what that looks like.
Yeah. So awesome. I love, so you brought up a couple of things. You brought up how if you weren't sure, you kind of put that question mark. That, like, I still do that all the time. So for the longest time, I hand wrote all of I have a bunch of journals, all handwritten. And what I would do is I would squiggle line underneath it of like, I'm not sure about this. And I would even sometimes it'd be like, it's either this or this. And so I put a little slash of, so
Yeah.
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 And now I've actually been using the Apple Pencil on an iPad. My roommate finally convinced me, and I can't swiggle line it. So I've been putting it in parentheses, like if I'm less sure about it. And even sometimes it's like you were also bringing up how what do you say, cat face of just, I don't know, this isn't, I've had a lot of times where as I'm getting the words, right, you're creating it, you're in the middle of a sentence, I'm like, this does not make sense. This does not line up with what I would expect you to say.
Yes.
And then you almost have to push past that, like, need to stop and let it keep flowing.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because then it's like, it makes complete sense when he's done with the sentence, right? And so I have had that a bit, and I've learned to just try not to get in my head and question it. Just let it go because we can always go back later, and then you can reread. And there are some times where I have that, like, I'm not sure about this, right? Put the question mark, and I'll cross out, oh no, that wasn't it. After I go back and I reread, and sometimes it's because, right, you at the individual sentence itself you're not sure about, but then when you read the entire context of like the full paragraph, there's a theme and it makes more sense. And so when you're going back and rereading it after, it's much easier to kind of see, okay, this does flow with the rest of the conversation, or this just doesn't resonate. I'm not sensing it as being true, and you can just cross it out. So letting it flow in the moment.
That is so, so important. I think I learned that early on. I think the first day was a strain, man. Like, that was hard. The second day, it got a little bit easier, but it was still kind of this like, like, I don't know. But I will tell you, like, by the third day and the fourth day, it came much easier. Like, now you kind of know what that looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. And I totally agree. There were so many times I'm like, is this what you're saying? What was that? What was that? And the more you're trying to get it right, I felt like it stopped the flow. And so you almost, as Daniel likes to say, my husband, you just have to take the accountability out. Like,
I love that. That's a great way to,
Like, I wasn't holding God accountable for what he's telling me. And when I try to and be like, what do you mean? Da, 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 as I'm journaling, it stops it. It makes it really hard. And I think that was what I was struggling with the first 2-3 days. There were literally days where, like in those first days, when he would be like, do not versus do. And I was like, was there a not in there? Because those are two completely opposite
I still
things,
do that.
God. Like, are you saying do or are you saying do not? Because I'm hearing both and I don't know which one it is. Those are the what? And now I don't get that very much anymore. I remember really struggling with that the first week. There was a lot of that. And I think it was literally because I was trying to kind of hold him accountable for every single word that he said, because I was just so like, I don't know what this looks like, right? And so I hardly ever have question marks anymore. Very, very few. In my journaling now, I just started my third month. I mean, this is new. But I would say I feel pretty confident and pretty free now. I'll just let it go. I'll just let it keep flowing and not question it.
I love how you're talking about the don't hold God accountable, right? If we get so caught up in the exact word, the exact sentence, like you're having a full conversation with God. And I've even had times where I've asked him, am I getting this? I mean, I asked him that a lot actually, but where I've asked him, am I hearing correctly, right? Am I writing this down correctly? And he basically said like, close enough. I'm kind of a perfectionist. I could say I'm a recovering perfectionist, right? I want to make sure I'm not getting it wrong. But when you get caught up and you're second guessing, it breaks that flow. And you're not only relying on God to answer or give you guidance in 2 words or in 1 sentence, you're having a full conversation and you can come back and have another conversation. And so it does take a lot of that pressure off of if you get 1 sentence wrong, it's okay because he's not only telling you in 1 sentence, he's having this full on long conversation.
Well, and I think it's really interesting because I can't say that I've had an experience where I can go back and point like that's wrong. Because even early on, there was a couple of times when he was having me write down like something that I know is like, that's not right. I don't know. I'm just trying to remember maybe something like, I'm not a God of mercy. And I'm like, that's not right. I know that's wrong. There's no way that that's right. There's no way you're having me write this down, God. And I had to your point, like really push through that because I paused there for a long time. And I was kind of like, is this me? Is this the devil? Is this God? I don't know. And I paused there and I just had such a hard time. And it just started kind of unraveling all my flow and my thinking. It's made me like start doubting, like, what if I'm not hearing this all correctly? And I remember pausing there for a really long time going, now I don't know what to do. And finally, I felt like God was like, just write it down. And I'm like, well, okay, then you're just going to have to like, I don't know how this is going to work out because you can't go against your word. Like once my mind started getting involved in kind of the situation, it messes God's words for me in a way. And so I just remember having that struggle early on. And when I pushed through and I started writing it down, oh, he will somehow work it so that that made sense. And I don't even know, like in that moment, you can't tell. And even as I'm going along, there's always a little pouty part of me that's in the back of my head going, I don't know if this is right, but I'm writing it down and you're just going to have to, like, I'm almost kind of like defiant in it. And then I finish and I come back and read it. And it was just like, oh, it's a whole new revelation. Yeah. And so I feel like it's super important. You cannot be judging
as you're
receiving. Yeah. And so I find that to be, I still don't know exactly how that works, but it's mind-boggling to me that I'm receiving the words, I'm interpreting the words. There's times when I'm going, what do you mean, God? Right? And I will literally write that down. I was like, is this what I'm hearing from you? What do you mean by this? And so it's not that I'm completely not listening. I am. But then I think there's a tricky spot between your corresponding and yet like, don't interrupt God, right? Like our conversations. Let the other person get all their words out. Yeah. And instead of us jumping in going, what? Did you mean this? What? Are you sure you said that? And so it's a really gentle back and forth, I think, that I'm learning to flow in. And when you come back and reread it, it's beautiful. There's also times, I think, to your point, I don't know that I can go back and pinpoint, oh, that sentence was not from God. I don't know that. There's certainly things where I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying here. That makes no sense to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. I'll leave it. And I've had early on, I want to say week 3 or something like that, where I'm journaling. And that whole day I was like, I have no idea what he just said. I wrote down a bunch of stuff, but I have no idea what you said. Well, then literally that evening, so many things happened. And when I came back that night, because I was just like, oh my God, I'm so traumatized by what happened today. And I came back and I was like, God, what was that? Well, I went back and read what he told me. He foretold.
I'm getting goosebumps.
He foretold what was going to happen 2 hours ago before things started happening. And I wouldn't have known that. When I came back and literally read the journal from earlier in the day, it all made sense. Things that didn't make any sense until they happened. It was mind-boggling. And I think, right, that's kind of like how the Bible works too, right? We can read the same thing over and over again, and yet there are times in our lives when the rhema comes through, right? You go back and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, or oh wow, this really resonates today, and he speaks through us with those same words, but at different times that will touch you and hit you differently.
Yeah.
And he does that, I found, with the journaling too. And so now I don't get too disturbed when I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying. Soon. What is soon? I don't know. Is that 2 hours from now? Is that 2 years from
Don't get
now?
me
Who
started on
knows,
soon.
right? And so I think it's really important to just kind of like let it flow and don't stop that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There's a balance. There's a learning process of you are having a conversation. So like asking that question, what did you mean by this? I often will say, am I receiving correctly? Like if I feel like I'm getting stuck.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that we've talked about is there are a lot of times, I mean, really throughout my journaling, it's not often where it just flows without any hesitation. My normal is I get like half a sentence at a time, and I will go back and I'll reread, and it kind of like kickstarts that flow again, and then I'll get the next sentence or the next half a sentence. And that's been something that it's funny. I didn't even think about it until we had a conversation about it.
Okay.
And such is something to keep in mind. It could be different for everybody, but I have found that again, it's all back to that flow, right? And so if I get distracted, how I come back into it, I don't typically just start right off. Like I will go back and I'll reread what is the last sentence, what's the last paragraph, and then the next part will come.
That's
right?
really interesting because I don't do that.
Okay.
I don't go back and read until I'm done with the whole journal.
Dude, I read.
So I will just, like, I will chase after it. I'll just be like, what do you mean by this? When you said soon, how soon? What do you mean when you talk about, I don't know, the butterfly? Who's the butterfly? What's the butterfly? Why is the butterfly in the garden? Like, I will ask. And sometimes, a lot of times, honestly, he will answer. And that was actually one of the things he told me very early on. Like, come to me. You can ask me anything. He told me, I think on day 2, like, yeah, I know this is new. Like, you're going to learn a new language. You're going to learn a new way. Yeah. Just come. I will walk through this with you. I also find it interesting. This is something that I've just learned in the last couple of weeks, honestly. Because I find he's giving me very specific things. And I know that you've been a little frustrated with your journaling lately, and it's almost a joke for us, inside joke, that he'll just be like, be you, be free, right? Be you, be me. And he doesn't do that with me very much. And I feel like it's because I'm still early.
Yeah.
So kindergartners need more instructions. Here, line up, use the brown, crayon and write these words. So he's giving me very clear, like step 1, step 2, do this, don't do that. And I feel like it's his way of kind of training up.
And building your confidence.
And building my confidence, and also teaching me, like, this is how I think about things. This is my viewpoint of things.
Yeah.
This is how I look at this situation instead of how you used to think about it. And so, and I haven't done this, but I'm almost curious if I go back to my original month, the first month of journaling, was it just a lot of like, God help, God help, God help? And I feel like not that the situation has changed, but my perspective of how I come to God is now a little bit different, I would say, now. And I feel that a little bit, like I'm approaching him differently now. There was a lot of journal in that first month with like, and what do you want me to do about this? What do you want me to do about that? Well, God, I got to pay bills. God, do you want me to move this money to this account? Like these kinds of things.
Very specific.
Very
practical.
specific things. And actually what was funny, and those were my worries, right? Those were my everyday worries. Like, what do you want me to do about this? What do you want me to do about that? And the early days, whenever I asked about those things that worried me, he would be like, put it away. I was like, what do you mean, put it away? I have bills too. What do you mean, put it away? And he just challenged me in a lot of ways to be like, no, you're asking about the wrong things. You're not focusing on the right things. And he would like always direct me, and he would be answering things that I didn't ask him about. Right? I'm like, I'm really concerned about this. And he'd be like, here, I want you to focus on this.
Yeah.
And you're like, huh. And I learned after like maybe a couple weeks, fine, I'll let him get his stuff out first.
And then I'll ask my questions. Yeah.
So there were days when I'd be like, oh, what would you like to tell me, God? And I'll let him do all of that. And then before we close, I'd be like, and what about my stuff, God? And sometimes he would give me very specific things, like do this. And sometimes he'd be like, be free, do whatever you want. And I'd be like, oh, there's that be free.
And
like,
you
what
feel my pain.
I felt your pain. I was like, what do you mean do whatever I want? I'm obviously coming to you because I'm like, I don't know what to do. And you're like, do whatever you want. Even that, I feel like was really training us in like, how do I be free and living the godly life, right? Like he knows we still have bills to pay. We still have problems to solve. We still have things that we got to figure out, but that's not what's important in a way, right? Things that we thought were like the biggest problems were like, who cares?
Right.
I don't want to say who cares from God, but like, it's like
It's
a
like,
little child, right? That would come to you and be like, mommy, mommy, mommy. And they're really concerned about what am I going to wear for, like, should I wear the blue shirt or should I wear the red shirt? And that is the biggest thing in their mind. And you're like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I feel like God shows me that a lot lately. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The things you're concerned about, I've got it taken care of. You could do whatever you want. Wear the blue shirt or wear the red shirt. Who cares?
Right. Yeah. I think it's huge. And I definitely have a similar theme where at the beginning, right, it was this mind blowing of like, I can ask him a specific thing and he'll give me a specific answer. And it was incredible and life changing and all the things. And then it was like, and I'm not going to give you as much detail. So like, I still remember.
You're a teenager now. That's what I think. I'm like, I'm in kindergarten. And you're like, the teenager gets a little more freedom now. Like, exercise what I've given you.
So I remember I was a manager and I had a position open and I was interviewing people. And so I was like so excited because this is the first time that I'm going to go through this kind of a decision. And I have my direct channel where I can ask God and like have him tell me specifically. So I asked him like, should I hire this person? And he's just like, do what you want. I mean, I remember him, it was at that time he said, I have not given you a paint by numbers kind of life. And yeah, it was like, right, I graduated to junior high or whatever.
You can paint your own.
Yeah, but I love how you described of how it's teaching us the way that he thinks.
Yeah.
And maybe if somebody had pressed me, I could come up with that, but like that's so true. And I see that when I complain about the be you, be true, be free. It's true though.
Yeah.
He's like, I've spent the past 5 years telling you every day, teaching you how I think, what my heart is. And so now it's this point of like, trust who you are in me. You can't spend 5 years with a best friend or a spouse and not have them impact the person that you are, right? And so it's like he's telling me, we've spent this quality time together. You have been changed because of this relationship, because of this time. Yeah. You've learned, you've grown. It has changed. It's not just that I've learned how God thinks. It has changed the way that I think. It has changed the way that I approach this life. And I still, don't get me wrong, I still ask all the like, how do I pay my bills questions. Absolutely. But yeah, it's come to this point of if it is important, especially if I'm like, I'm not getting it, right? There's been times where he's really trying to, I like the idea, the analogy of a parent, right? Mm-hmm. He's really trying to, you're on your way, but you can't quite get it. Like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, right?
Yeah.
But so sometimes he'll give me, right? If it's, I'm just frustrated and I really, really need it, or I'm not getting it, or it is important. Like he still does answer those direct questions sometimes, but more often than not, it's the like, be you. And really, in your heart what's true. And that's been a big thing. It's part of his growing process in me is learning to trust my heart and learning what it, like how to discern what is that truest what is that truth in you? Because we can always get, just like you were talking about when you're breaking the flow of listening, right? You're questioning this and what about that? I think we can do that just in how we approach life. And so it's just like the two-way journaling is, like you said, almost like learning a new language. There's an aspect of that of just living and being in this life of learning how to tune in. What is that truest part of you? What is the worries? What is the opinions of others? What is the old broken beliefs and lies? And what is that true? And that's really, I think, a big part of, for me, probably the past couple of years of what he's been teaching me, training me in. But I needed the years of journaling. And that's something I want to say briefly is what I've seen in you, right? You describe like how it's shifted. You're describing what's happened in 3 months. That was like 3 or 4 years for me. So that's something that it's been beautiful to see is this acceleration. It's been beautiful to see I mean, frankly, I benefit from a lot of the revelation that you get because he is more specific with you sometimes. I'm like, I need Anna to ask this question because he won't tell me. But yeah, it's been incredible to just share the journey and like be a recipient of the beautiful revelation that he's sharing with you. And so much of it is, yes, it's for you, it's for your family, but it's for this world and all the things that we touch together. And so it's been incredible.
That's so sweet. I think it only can happen in that accelerated form because I've seen you and we've shared about your journaling and what that looks like and how God's worked with you through all this. And so I didn't have to learn the lesson the way that you had to learn. And so I think being able to talk about that and share that with each other allows me to be able to kind of accelerate on that growth path so much faster. And I also think, and so there's a part of me that's like, oh, take this step-by-step thing right now because it's not always going to be like this. Like, oh my goodness, that is so helpful. Thank you, God. Right? Like, yes, I could use the very clear instructions, but I think it's just also a season, right? I'm in that season where he is totally reshifting how I go about every day. So I talked earlier about like my Bible reading streak is like 2 days. This is highly embarrassing as a Christian, but I've kind of released that. My husband calls it like we are now moving past the white knuckling, right? So many years, if we don't hear from God, if we're not getting an answer for like the answer from my background is pray harder, pray longer, right? And maybe go into your closet a little more. And yes and no, right? That's still like you're straining to hear from God. You're practicing how to hear from God. Now to just have that direct download, to have the words on a page. There's also something about the written word, like whether it's on the Bible page, and I'm not discounting that at all, or the written word on my iPad that I can read specifically and come back to. Yeah. When you waver, when you're starting like, am I crazy? Am I really supposed to do this? It's so helpful to be able to go back and read it and like to hold it, right? Absolutely. Which I think I appreciate because there's times when I will get images or visions, as you know. I can't, like I can recall that, but I'm kind of hanging on to it in my memory. But to come back to a piece of paper that actually says what God told me about this, very helpful. So I find this to be an extra help in that step of affirmation and trusting God's word and all of those things. So I'm going to tell you also kind of a funny story. So there's been so many days when I'm like, okay, I have all these things I got to get done today. Like I've got work to do, God, right? And I'll sit down and I'll start journaling. And he's like, put that away. Here's what I need you to do instead. And I'd be like, but that was not what I planned on today. This is what I needed to do. And he's like, no, I need you to go do this. And I call it God hijacking my day, right? Like he would just hijack my day. And I find myself like there were weeks and weeks where I was like, oh my God, I have not done any work. I have been hijacked by God day after day after day to go pray for this, to go do this, to do, frankly, I would call it kingdom work, right? Whether it's praying for certain people, caring for certain people, whatever that looks like. to the point, like yesterday, I'm gonna be super honest. I was like, God, I really need a work day. Like, I really need to get my stuff done here. I purposely did not journal first thing in the morning because I was like
You
afraid.
wanted to change your day.
I
love that.
cannot have him hijack my day today. Okay, I don't care. I need to get my stuff done, and I like journaled at the end of the day. Right? It's like, and it was a little bit of sheepish, like. You know what I did. I know you know what I did, right? But like, I can't. I just need like that piece to get my stuff done. And he's always so gentle about it. Like what I love is I've always said all along that our God has a sense of humor, right? Like I remember this very, very early on when I took my kids to the aquarium and I saw like, what is that? Dragon horse?
Oh, the seahorse?
Seahorse, right? And a sea dragon. And I remember seeing the sea dragon and there's like this huge long tail behind it. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, the creativity of God to create something like that. That is a funny, crazy looking thing, right? Like, and you see all these creatures, you're like, there's no way that this God has a sense of humor. These are funny looking stuff. And so one of the things I love is like the journaling that I have is not like this is
Thus saith
God.
the Lord.
Yes, this is your God speaking here now. You know, no, like he will laugh with me. He will tease me, and I will, instead of like question marks a lot these days, I actually will say things like, "He's laughing at me." I will put in quotes like laughing. I can sense God's kind of laughing at me, and he's kind of like, "Yeah, I know what you did. And it's okay, girl. Like, don't worry about it. I know you. We can, work this out," kind of thing. And so he's gracious and kind and funny, and it's just personal in a relationship. And so, and grace. Right? Like he knows. Like I was like, I can't handle another day of hijacking, God. I can't even face you right now. I just gotta go get my stuff done. And he's fine with it, right? He will work it out. It's not like, oh my gosh, I had an assignment and because I didn't check in with him this morning, somehow I missed my destiny, somehow I would disobey God. No. I like, if somehow Anna was a little weak that day and needed to get her stuff done, is that God's stuff done, God can use somebody else.
Yeah.
God can do something about that. And so this is that perspective that we're talking about. Like, I wouldn't have thought about that before.
Right.
I don't know that I would have had that understanding in the past.
Yeah.
About, oh my gosh. And so when you have that, I feel like there's less of you need to do something, you have to do something. I think it changes your, like, I want to hear from God. Mm-hmm. I want to please God. I want to walk and follow his instructions. There's days when I don't, right? Like yesterday when I'm like, okay, sorry, God, I'm going to go do this. But that's a relationship, right? Like we do that with our friends, right? Mm-hmm. I really want to be with you, but sorry, I really got to that's the kind of relationship that we can have with God in a way too. And so I love that part about this two-way journaling that's revealing his nature and that personal relationship, but that it's also very godly and very human at the same time. Yeah. Right?
It's beautiful. Well, we could talk for hours and hours. So I just want to, is there any last thing that you want to make sure we share, whether it's tips or an encouragement before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's just try it. I think more than anything else, I love the two-way journaling. I just think that in today's world, more than anything else, I would encourage everybody to just be intentional about finding a quiet space. Whether that quiet space is so that you can journal and talk to God, or that quiet space so that you can hear from God, pray to God, whatever that looks like, and whether it's meditation or whatever you call it, I find as long as you find a quiet time, you will hear from God in one way or another. Yeah. And I think that's what prevents most people from hearing more than anything else. So I used to, when you get in the car, we're in Southern California, lots of driving, right? always have the radio on. My husband has a ear pod in his head all day, all the time, right? And he's now learning, like, I need to take that out sometimes, right? When there's other people's voices, and whether it's podcast, music, radio, whatever it is, you're then not hearing from God, right? So I now drive quietly. Like, I don't turn on the radio. I use that time to, even though I'm driving, I'm processing, I'm having conversations, I'm thinking. For me, that's just an easy, like, switch years ago that I realized I need to be more intentional about just having time where there is no other voice in our life. And so it might not mean journaling. It might mean just making sure you have quiet time in your day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that God has said to me as stillness. That's how I describe it. Stillness is the key. And that stillness can look different, right? Like for an introvert, it's usually pretty quiet and alone. But you may need activity in a way. And so maybe that's taking a walk in nature, a walk in the park. But it's like you use that description of turning off all the other voices.
Yes.
And so even if you are an extrovert, like you need to be intentional about that, but finding a way to get to that stillness. And I agree. And I think even creating space for that, if you don't have any of that in your life, any like rest, stillness, then when you do finally sit down and try to tune in and listen to what God is saying, like your soul is just like, oh my gosh, I can finally take a breath. And it may not be as quality as it could be if you have more of a balance of that, almost a rhythm in your life. And then you're using some of that time to tune in.
And I just want to add, I do think, so for Daniel, he will now take a walk or even just work out without earpods, right? Do laundry, full laundry without earpods. Like, we are so used to turning something on whenever we're doing something. We're so used to having multiple things going on all the time. And it's as simple as really, you're still going about your day, but turn off the voices, turn off the TV, turn off the media, turn off whatever it is that's distracting you. And then kind of lean into that and push through. Like, it's going to feel uncomfortable for those 5-10 minutes.
Right.
And but it's so important. And I think just for our mental health being like, to practice that would be kind of amazing for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much for just spending some time chatting about it all, sharing some of your experience. I'm so excited. I think we're going to have to do a part 3. There's more that we could talk about. Well, thank you guys for joining us. And I just encourage you, try it out. I did actually remember to bring, I had let somebody borrow, but I got it back. So this is the actual book, 4 Keys to Hearing God's Voice. I will put a link in the show notes back to the first episode kind of intro if you missed that. And I'll repeat some of those key resources if you want to kind of start from square one. But try it out. You never know. And it could be just as life-changing as it's been for Anna and I. So I just encourage you. Thanks for joining. Thanks for tuning in to the Sincerely God podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends. If you'd like more information, you can go to my website, sincerelygod.com. There you'll find links to my social media, as well as an ability to get your own copy of Sincerely God, a collection of quotes, either the book or the prayer journal. Until next time, keep listening to how God is speaking to you.
It's all inside you, waiting to